Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States. He served from 1945 to 1953. Truman became president on April 12, 1945, following the sudden death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. He had only been vice president for 82 days before taking office. One of Truman's most significant decisions was authorizing the use of atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The bombings brought an end to World War II. In 1947, Truman introduced the Truman Doctrine, which provided financial and military aid to countries threatened by communism, marking the beginning of the Cold War containment policy. Another significant foreign policy initiative, the Marshall Plan, it aimed to provide economic assistance to war-torn Europe to help prevent the spread of communism. Truman's domestic agenda, known as the Fair Deal, sought to expand social welfare programs, increase the minimum wage, and promote civil rights. In 1948, Truman issued an executive order desegregating the U.S. military, marking a significant step towards civil rights reform. Truman oversaw the early years of the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, which began when North Korea invaded South Korea. After leaving the White House in 1953, Truman returned to his hometown of Independence, Missouri. The Harry S. Truman Library and Museum was established there, preserving his legacy.
Dwight D. Eisenhower served as the 34th President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. He was a highly decorated military general and the Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces during World War II, leading the successful D-Day invasion of Normandy, defeating Nazi Germany. A member of the Republican Party, his notable domestic achievement was establishing the interstate highway system via the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, transforming transportation and commerce. Eisenhower advanced U.S. space exploration by establishing NASA in response to the Soviet Union's Sputnik launch. He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1957 and enforced desegregation in schools after the landmark Brown v. Board of Education case. Focusing on foreign policy, his New Look approach emphasized nuclear deterrence and reduced military spending. In his farewell address, he warned against the military-industrial complex. Dwight D. Eisenhower remains a significant figure in American history, renowned as both a military leader and a two-term president.
John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, served from 1961 to 1963 until his tragic assassination. Notably, he was the youngest elected president at 43. The Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962 marked a critical moment in his presidency. With the U.S. and the Soviet Union in a tense confrontation over nuclear missiles in Cuba, Kennedy prioritized advancing America's space exploration. He set the ambitious goal of landing a man on the moon before the end of the 1960s. The civil rights movement had a profound impact on Kennedy's policy decisions, prompting him to champion civil rights legislation and advocate for desegregation in schools. In 1961, he took a significant step by creating the Peace Corps, sending American volunteers overseas to engage in development projects. John F. Kennedy's unforgettable inaugural address deeply resonated with the nation, inspiring citizens to actively contribute to their country's progress with the powerful message, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." His assassination on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, Texas, profoundly shocked and grieved the nation. Kennedy's brief but impactful presidency remains a pivotal part of the nation's history.
Lyndon B. Johnson served as the 36th President of the United States from November 22, 1963 to January 20, 1969. He became president following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. His key achievements include the Civil Rights Act, 1964, and the Voting Rights Act, 1965, combating racial segregation and voter discrimination. Johnson's Great Society aimed to end poverty and racial injustice, introducing programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Head Start. However, the Vietnam War overshadowed his progressive domestic policies, sparking protests and divisions. After an alleged attack in the Gulf of Tonkin, 1964, Congress approved the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, escalating U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Johnson authorized Operation Rolling Thunder, a massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam. His tenure saw the rise of the counterculture hippie movement and anti-war protests. The 25th Amendment, proposed in his time, addressed presidential succession and disability. Johnson wouldn't seek re-election, prioritizing ending the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War spanned nearly 2 decades, resulting in significant loss of life and enduring impacts on Vietnam and the United States.
Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, held office from 1969 to 1974. During World War II, he served in the U.S. Navy. He was stationed in the Pacific Theater and rose to the rank of lieutenant commander. His career was a mix of successes and setbacks. Initially known as an ardent anti-communist, he rose to prominence as Eisenhower's vice president. His Checkers speech showcased his resilience during a campaign crisis, winning over voters. Nixon's presidency is tarnished by the Watergate scandal, where a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, linked to his administration, set off a series of deceitful actions and cover-ups. In 1974, facing potential impeachment, Nixon made history by resigning, becoming the first U.S. president to do so. Following his resignation, Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, controversially pardoned him. While intended to unify the nation, this move sparked debates on accountability and fueled public skepticism toward the political establishment. Nixon's presidency is a study in contrasts. His adept handling of international diplomacy, particularly with China and the Soviet Union, earned recognition. However, his legacy is equally defined by the Watergate scandal.
Gerald Ford, the 38th President of the United States, served from 1974 to 1977. He became president following Nixon's resignation due to the Watergate scandal, making him the first unelected president and vice president. Ford's controversial decision to pardon Nixon aimed to heal the nation, but drew criticism. Prior to becoming president, Ford served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 25 years, making him the longest-serving House Minority Leader in history. He served in World War II on the USS Monterey. Gerald Ford was born as Leslie Lynch King Jr. in Omaha, Nebraska. His family moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan when he was young. He was later adopted by his stepfather, changing his name to Gerald Rudolph Ford Jr. Ford's presidency was marked by economic turmoil, including high inflation and unemployment. His administration faced difficulties in trying to manage these economic issues. In the 1976 election, Ford narrowly lost to Jimmy Carter, making him the only president in U.S. history to be both unelected as president and unelected as vice president. He survived 2 assassination attempts in 1975. Ford's legacy lies in stabilizing a nation in crisis and attempting to address pressing economic issues.
Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, held office from 1977 to 1981. Carter had a diverse background that included attending the United States Naval Academy and graduating in 1946. Carter's early career saw him serving in the Navy and engaging in studies related to nuclear physics and reactor technology. Before his presidency, Carter served as Georgia's governor from 1971 to 1975. One of Carter's significant achievements was brokering the Camp David Accords in 1978. These negotiations led to a historic peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, which helped stabilize relations in the Middle East. Perhaps one of the most challenging events during Carter's presidency was the Iran hostage crisis. In 1979, Iranian militants stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took American hostages. The crisis lasted for 444 days, spanning his presidency and contributing to his defeat in the 1980 election. Notably, Carter advocated for energy conservation and renewable energy sources, leading to the creation of the Department of Energy. He strived to reduce American reliance on foreign oil. In recognition of his efforts, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his work in conflict resolution, democracy promotion, and human rights. Carter's post-presidential years were characterized by his commitment to humanitarian causes. He co-founded the Carter Center, focusing on global health, election monitoring, and conflict resolution.
Ronald Reagan served as the 40th President of the United States from January 20, 1981, to January 20, 1989. Before entering politics, Reagan had a successful career in Hollywood as an actor and appeared in over 50 films. He also hosted the television show General Electric Theater. He grew up in a modest family and pursued various jobs before entering politics. Reagan started as a Democrat, but eventually became a Republican. He served as the governor of California from 1967 to 1975, which marked his entry into national politics. Reagan is known for his conservative economic policies, often referred to as Reaganomics. He advocated for tax cuts, reduced government regulation, and a focus on free market principles to stimulate economic growth. Reagan played a significant role in ending the Cold War. His strong stance against the Soviet Union, including the famous "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall" speech at the Berlin Wall, contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet bloc. Reagan survived an assassination attempt by John Hinckley Jr. Reagan's administration was involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, where arms were secretly sold to Iran to fund Nicaraguan rebels. The controversy tarnished his legacy, although he maintained that he had no knowledge of the specifics. After leaving office, Reagan's popularity grew, and he is often revered by conservatives as a transformative figure. In 1994, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and he passed away on June 5, 2004, at the age of 93. Ronald Reagan, one of the most influential presidents in recent U.S. history,